Go.
Mr. Custer, can you give us a little background on your radiology?
My radiology experience? I have 28 years as a radiology technologist. I work many different hospitals. I have done many different studies. I've done a lot of studying on the field myself. I've become more of an expert at it in my own sense because of taking my time, looking at things. I don't jump to conclusions. I use my basic knowledge first, add to my basic experience, and the knowledge that I have, my technical knowledge. This, I feel, kind of helped me 30-some years ago when I was in the morgue x-raying President Kennedy's body, which today has caused me quite a bit of problems, which I've sloughed off. I figured, well, it doesn't really bother me. Make the best of it. But what I always used to irate me to the high heaven is they never came to me and asked me, what did I see that night? What was important? How come this didn't happen? For that particular night in November, we had a busy day in the x-ray department, and one of my fellow co-workers came to me and asked me, he said, is there any possible way you can take my duty for me? I'm a 22-year-old fella, single. I was living on base, and I was at least 4.5 hours from home. I said, sure, why not? And this was his anniversary night. It was a special night for him. He wanted to take his wife on. And I said, sure, I'll take it. Little did I know that this night would change everything throughout the years for me. And during the day, we were watching the news broadcast, and we found out that Kennedy was shot in Dallas. And I thought, nah, they would never bring him here. What happened? And around 6:30, from 6:30 to 8:30 in that time period, I was notified by the officer of the day that I was to take a portable x-ray machine and a bunch of films to the morgue. That a special person was coming in and they needed x-rays. They never told me exactly who, but here's one thing that I don't think you know, Bill. They brought this out to me. The officer today said to me that he was coming in from Walter Reed. Now, JFK was a Navy man. Why would they take him to Walter Reed? He actually was brought in by helicopter. He wasn't brought in by ambulance. And I took the films and the cassettes to the morgue, and I set everything up. And we sat there and waited, and they said, well, he should be arriving at any moment. They brought him in the casket, put the casket down, they opened it. Now here's one thing that Dr. Ebersol brought out in his deposition, that he helped remove the body from the casket, which is literally bunk. Ebersol had nothing to do with it. Ebersol was lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. As long as they're enlisted a man around, an officer is not going to dirty his hands. Mm-hmm. That's what the enlisted man is for. If you know anything about the military service, you know exactly why I'm right. So we proceeded to remove the body from the casket and place it on the autopsy table.
Now, if I can interrupt for a moment, what kind of casket did you see?
There were two different caskets there. One was a regular shipping casket, one was a ceremonial casket. And we were told the ceremonial casket was for later on, to be Kennedy's body placed in that casket and taken wherever he was to be taken.
But you did see a cheap shipping casket?
Yes.
All right. And so you were there when the body was taken out?
Correct.
And did you help take the body out?
Correct.
And you helped place him on the table?
Correct. One thing that I noticed in particular, the head was completely covered by a plastic bag, and there was a sheet around it. The sheet, of course, was bloody, and nothing was ever mentioned about that. It was just that once we placed him on the autopsy table, we were told that we wouldn't be needed at that time, that we could leave and go back up to the department. So we left, and we went back up. In a matter of an hour or two, we came back, and the Y incision had already been made. All right? Dr. Ebersol was there. We come in. I walked over to him. I said, what kind of x-rays do you want? I'll leave that to your discretion. Oh, come on. I'm only an HM3 x-ray technician. He's a radiologist. He should tell me what to take. So I just proceeded to start taking films in the head. And during this time, we covered every cassette because there was a lot of body fluid. And this was brought out later that Dr. Ebersol, during his deposition, he had stated that there were a lot of artifacts due to dirty cassettes, which is, in my estimation, was baloney again, because I knew we took that precaution as I saw that. We took an AP film, we took a lateral film, and actually we took 2 lateral films. But here's one thing that had been brought up in later on. Both laterals had the same marking on them. That was due to my fault. I was a young man, excited, trying to do the best possible job I can. And I had totally mismarked one film. But I was able to distinguish the films by the defect on the right side, which you can see here. I knew this had to be the right lateral because I got the complete distance that I needed, which was 44 inches, which was a normal study distance for any films. The lateral that I had difficult getting the decent distance was the left lateral because of the gallery, the way the table was situated. It was too close to the gallery and I couldn't get the film far enough, or the tube far enough away. So there was a slight distance change. And this portion of the back skull was cut off.
Now you had to do this right in the amphitheater.
Right in the amphitheater.
So with pandemonium going on all around you.
Correct.
You had to take these x-rays.
Correct.
Explain for the audience a little bit about the amphitheater and how it was situated and the atmosphere that night.
Can we stop for a minute?
Okay. What was the morgue like, to give people a better understanding? I need you to give us a little background on that, and I want to know how people were acting. What was the general atmosphere of the morgue that night?
Well, that evening, well actually, here is a diagram of the morgue itself. You can see where the outside loading dock is, where they brought the coffin in. This was with an honor guard. Brought the coffin in through the cooling room, and then into the main morgue itself. All right, this was a table that was about 5 feet off the ground, and that's where they were doing most of their dissecting, and then they had a regular weight there to weigh the different organs. When they brought the coffin in, set them right about here in front of the gallery. The gallery ran along the back of the wall here. This is where all the Joint Chiefs, the Secret Service, and I'm sure there were CIA there, and a lot of people dressed in suits and ties that night. They brought the coffin in, set him here. They opened the coffin. We took the body, brought him over here to the autopsy table. Now, if you've ever seen an autopsy table, they have like a head holder. It's a metal head holder that sits on the back portion of the skull. And they set them on that, and then they dissect the body. But when I was taking my x-rays, that head holder was gone. They had taken it off. So that made a big difference there, because that caused a lot of confusion with a lot of researchers. They wanted to know, how did you ever get x-rays through that thing? It was removable. Here's the problem, what I was trying to tell you before. When I come around, I was able to put my x-ray machine here, the body, and I was able to take the right lateral here with no trouble. But once I got back here towards the gallery, I was too close to the gallery. I couldn't get the normal distance that I wanted to. Plus, rigor mortis played a big, big part. Let me take you to this AP position again. If you look at the AP position, look at the size of the eyes. Kind of enlarged, aren't they? All right, you know why?
Why?
Distortion. The head, at that time, due to rigor mortis, had been brought back and off to the side. And it was kind of hard to get things situated. So a lot of researchers had brought up later, well, maybe this was taken in a PA position, but you have to remember, this is a person that has already been autopsied. He has a Y incision. How are you going to flip him over on his stomach? There's nothing to flip him on. Plus, you can see the skull fragments. What's going to hold the head together? So basically, you shoot them as they lie to get as much evidence as possible. A lot of other things that were brought up later was, well, how come the orbits are so enlarged? When you shoot an X-ray, you have diverging rays. And the way the body was tilted, the rays were hitting on an angle and elongating the orbits, even though it was taken in an AP position, which deformed a lot of the bone fragments here, a lot here, here. It's not a typical good AP projection, but for that night and that time, it told exactly what they wanted to see. Same thing on the lateral. There's a slight rotation, but it's kind of hard to tell. You got to look here at the sella turcica. That is the keystone of the skull cap, which holds the brain in. If you see the thickening, there's minimal rotation there. Plus, you'll see a little thickening here. There's a bone here, and then the same bone is over here. Slight rotation again. So you are getting a kind of foggy picture. Let's put it that way. I don't want to keep it in basic terms as possible. A foggy picture. But like I had brought out before about the bullet fragment coming in from the front, everybody, even the Warren Commission, it stated the bullet had come back from the backward. The autopsy stated the bullet come in from behind. They said, well, here's the bullet wound. There's the complete rounded bullet wound. See what happened here once we put the cap on it and all that, which was baloney. If the bullet had come in from behind, it would have blown the eye completely out. The bullet came from the front, and it's in as a Zapruder film. It shows where the body was lifted upward and back. The skull cap was blown out and back. The brain fragments were blown out and back. Is there anything you want to ask me, Bill?
Well, when you say that the body was blown back and the brains were blown, if you look at the, you'll see out this way. What do you got to say about that?
Spray. You got to remember now, you're talking about fragment and bullet. It's a bullet going through, exploding as it's going through. So when it's exploding as it's going through, explosions go this way, that way, this way.
So your feeling was that he was hit by an exploding bullet,
Right.
and that would explain the massive amount of spraying
Correct.
and brain matter.
Right. And it proves right here. It shows all the fragments. One steel-jacketed bullet would have never done that. It would have went clean through.
Now I've noticed in this area here, it looks like the skull is gone. Can you explain to me why we have this defect here?
You mean this complete defect?
Yes.
What you're looking at, you got to remember, is an AP projection. You're looking at an area that is right here, but you could possibly be seeing defects back here, defects here. The only possible way to tell exactly where the defect is by taking a lateral film. And you can see it if you turn it to the side. Here's that area you were looking at.
Right.
Everything, the fragments are traveling in that direction, outward. It's lifted everything out, overlapped everything. I had made an analogy before about the condition of the skull. The skull is, take a hard-boiled egg, boil it, take it out, cool it off, and run it in your hands. It's exactly what the skull fragments are like. Anything else, Bill?
Stop the camera for a moment.
So hold on to that.
All right. When you're ready.
Go.
Go.
Can you explain to me what constitutes bullet fragments to you, why this looks the way it does, why you think that the bullet, based on your experiences, came from the front?
Basically, and this is one thing that you got to remember, anything taking, if you take an x-ray of anything, no matter what it is, anything radio opaque, which is, will absorb x-rays, will show up on the film. King-size radio opaque object, fragment, fragment, fragment. Now this is what Dr. Ebersol came right out in his deposition and stated were artifacts. Come on, any common person would say, well, how come so many? It
Why so
can't
many?
be.
Why so many?
Because it's a fragmenting bullet.
Based on your experience, you're sure of that?
Absolutely. A steel-jacketed shell would go completely through, not fragment. A fragmented bullet is used to destroy tissue. That's why, have you ever heard of the Talon bullet? It's a new market bullet that they have. They had it on the market for less than 6 weeks. They pulled it off real quick, didn't they?
Yes.
Because of fragmentation, because of mushrooming. It was used to destroy and tear. And you can see all the fractures are emanating from that point. They're all coming off that area. Look at the nasal septum. It's deviated to the left. Look at the sinuses, how cloudy. Maxillary sinuses, frontal sinuses. These sinuses are completely gone. What's that tell you? It tells you that the bullet had to go through there.
And in your opinion, that's because of an exploding bullet?
Exploding bullet.
And you definitely think from what you see in this, by the way, is this an actual x-ray that you took?
This is the actual x-ray I took.
So you remember it being this way that night?
Absolutely.
So being that this is an original x-ray that you took, you can tell, based on your experiences, that the shot came from the front?
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything else of interest about this picture that you can tell us?
Massive destruction.
Massive destruction.
They wanted to make sure this man was dead. And they did a good job of it. You have to stop and think. This man was before his time. He wanted to do things. As they put it, it was the age of Camelot. King Arthur's court. If you ever knew anything about King Arthur's court, chivalry. He wanted to take it back to the basic honesty of life. Not in this society, not today, never happened. Too many people want too many things, and they're not going to let somebody like this ruin it.
Now this picture is also one that you took?
Yes, sir. Same thing. It shows the fragment in the frontal sign right here, exploding as it goes further on back. You get the conus effect.
For the lay audience, what's the conus effect?
All right, a conus effect is like a cone. As the bullet fragments, it spreads out the further it goes back. And as far back as it goes, it'll widen. It'll be like a complete sheet that smacks tissue, brain cells, everything. It pushes them straight out. That's why I said you can see the brain cap. It's completely up and off. Overriding of this brain, or this fragment, over top. Overriding here, overriding here. See an overriding here. See the double density.
What does that double density tell you?
That there's one bone on top of another. Completely from being pushed backwards and up.
Backwards and up. So he would have had to have been hit to drive it backwards and up like that.
Right.
You feel, and this proves it from the density of the bone.
Absolutely.
So that you can tell that these bones have been pushed one on top of the other.
Right.
Is this correct?
Correct.
Now, why is the back of the head? Why do you not see bone out of the back of the head where the Dallas doctor said he had a wound?
That's kind of hard because you got to remember the way the body was placed on the autopsy table. It was not visualized because it was hid. If you looked at the x-rays, you can see bone missing in the back.
So you can tell from this shot that there's bone missing in the back, but not necessarily
from the lateral.
From the lateral.
Right, because there could be there could be some bone on the one side hiding the defect on the other side.
The reason I'm going into this in such detail about these two x-rays is they're very important, and that a lot of researchers feel that these have been forged. But I have you telling me that these are the x-rays you took, and explaining why there's so much confusion amongst people that we have what appears to be a frontal blowout here of the face.
Right.
You're saying that's not what happened?
No.
Okay. And that back of the
There's
head,
destruction there.
there's destruction, but no frontal blowout. And
if there was a blowout, the right eye would not have been in its socket.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
The right eye was protruding from the socket. And basically you can understand it because the orbit, there's nothing left of the orbit to hold it. All the tendons and ligaments are gone, they're tore. So the eye's just laying there.
Let's cut.
They said that was cut open.
Oh, okay. Just let me know when you want to start.
We're not taping it? Okay,
Not-
good.
Okay. Hold on one sec. Go.
Okay, like I had stated before, the right eye was protruding. You notice here, the eye is further forward than the left eye. And look at the skull. There's an indentation on this side here. If you'll notice, there's a blackened area that comes down along my pen. That is part of the defect.
The black part in the skull?
Right. Here's one thing that was brought out. Now, I had nothing to do with these films. I had no idea when these were possibly taken. But you must remember, during this time, the mortician came in after I was done. And he already started working on the body. So I don't know when these films were taken, or these photos were taken. These could have been after the mortician made his different adjustments.
You mean to tell me that this is possible, that after you had done your work, that they already had a mortician come in?
Oh, absolutely.
And start working on the body
Absolutely.
already? Right there in the morgue?
Right. In fact, we were stepping on each other. When I was taking my x-rays, I had to chase Floyd Reevy out of the road so I could take a film. And there constantly, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the different generals and admirals were getting in the road, and I had to chase them. One thing I must bring out: the autopsy was run at a haphazard manner. The only people that knew what they were doing were the technicians, were the enlisted men. The two pathologists were administrators, paper pushers. They would go over the autopsy records done by somebody else. Dr. Ebersol, big question mark. He had stated, oh, I was the assistant chief radiologist that night. Baloney! He was placed in charge because nobody else wanted the duty that night. All Dr. Ebersol was, he wasn't even a board-certified radiologist. Hadn't even taken his boards. He had finished his residency. If you'd read anything up on Ebersol, Ebersol was a radiation excuse me. He took care of radiation oncology. He knew a lot about radiation biology and physics. Only, he had stated in his deposition, if I'm not wrong, he had only viewed 20 to 25 cases that were involved in gunshot wounds. Now, how can this make him an expert? He didn't know a bullet fragment if it come up and bit him. His favorite thing was, well, this could possibly be, but I believe it's an artifact. Everything was an artifact. Even the right lateral, can I have that, Bill? Right lateral skull. The right lateral skull. Oh no, I mean the AP, I'm sorry. The AP skull. He took the AP skull that night, put it over a hot light, which is a light that all the radiologists use they feel is just in case anything is dark, they can bring out the detail better with the hot light. Placed it over the hot light. He knows as well as I do. You do not place the film right on top of the hot light like this. It's going to burn it. He burns it right on the area where the bullet entrance is. Oh my, look what I did. Did he do it intentionally, or was he told to do it?
What was his behavior? How was he acting when he did that?
He constantly looked towards the gallery. Constantly looked towards the pathologists for guidance. He wasn't an expert guiding them. They were guiding him. His job should have been an expert guiding them, saying, well, here's a bullet fragment here, it entered here, and it exited here. Look at all the fragments going up. He wasn't shot from the back, he was shot from the front. Now I'm going to bring this article out. It was in the Phoenix Journal. This is Ebersol's home paper, stating, this news reporter stated, that Kennedy was shot from the front, where it brought him, hit him in the front, brought him upward and back. He made a statement that he felt this was due to a mechanism within the limousine. The reason why he said this, I don't know if many people realize this, but the limousine was destroyed 48 hours after the assassination. Why did they destroy it? More evidence.
Lyndon Johnson gave the order for that,
That's right.
if I recall.
Look what happened to the Vietnam crisis after Kennedy was assassinated. We stayed how many more years in Vietnam? How many more people died? How many more industrialists made millions? And guess what? How about the Joint Chief of Staff that was fired? He was reinstated. Why?
Which Joint Chief of Staff?
There was one gentleman, I don't know his name exactly, it eludes me right now, that was an opponent to Kennedy's drawing all the troops out of Vietnam, and he made it known. You're wrong, you shouldn't do this. Kennedy had his own little advisor. Bobby Kennedy played a very important part in his presidential campaign, plus in his administration. He always went to Bobby for advice. This is why many, Johnson hated Bobby Kennedy. He thought he was a snot-nosed brat, rich brat, literally. But Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy was always there to protect Big Brother's back, and vice versa. If you notice, not too many years thereafter, when Bobby became a front runner, what happened to him? Assassinated by a supposedly half-crazed Palestinian. How about Martin Luther King? Isn't it funny how all these people seem like they're interlocked?
It does seem that way, at least to a lot of researchers.
It does. If you stop and think about it. Here's one thing I want to bring on. When you said about the back of the head, how come you can't see it on the AP skull and the lateral skull? The next book, the next video that comes out, I will tell you why. I will say this much now. If you look at this portion of the skull and look at the Zapruder film of the back of the limousine where the president is laying to his side on Jacqueline's shoulder, you will see the hole. All you have to do is just look.
You feel this can be seen in the Zapruder frames?
Absolutely. But you have to look at the correct frame on the back of the limousine where Kennedy is laying against his wife's shoulder. See that, then you'll know. Did we bring this out before about... No, I didn't. Let me correct myself right now. If you'll notice, lateral skull, Bill. If you would take a protractor, measure the angle coming in here and going upward, and draw a line straight back. Get that angle there. It would be anywhere from 40 to 45 degrees upward. If you take that angle and follow that angle further out, away from the limousine, that should give you a general idea of where the shot came from. Now all I can do is give you a little supposition to the fact. But isn't it funny that there is a culvert right down from the grassy knoll at that particular angle? Is it possible that that shell could have come from that angle. This shell, this shot, was the killing shot. He could have lived through the shot and went through his neck.
You're certain of that from what you saw?
Absolutely. He could have lived through that. All that was is just a few fractured cervicals. But today, that's nothing. And even then, that's nothing. He was at National Naval Medical Center, the creme de la creme of all medical centers. They had all the neurosurgeons there that could have took care of that. This was the killing shot. He was literally assassinated. There was a conspiracy. The government has a tendency to think for the people. We have the silent majority. All the silent majority cares about bread and butter from day to day, paying their bills. As long as the government don't step on my feet, I can't control them. So why should I worry about them? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
How did you feel knowing when you first saw his body? Now, you've been living with this for a number of years. You were 22 years old?
Right.
Around that area? How did you feel with your experience and your as a radial technologist, seeing what you saw, taking the x-rays, putting your hands on the President of the United States, and the evidence telling you one thing, but yet it comes out different?
This is my country. I served in the United States Navy because I knew that they wanted me to serve and they needed me. But it was quite disillusioning to the fact I knew the truth of the matter. I knew why. I won't lie to you. During that time, I did what I was told. And I kind of looked at it and thought, well, wait a minute, this isn't right. This can't be. But as I've gotten older, I've looked at it more with experienced eyes, looked at the evidence a lot closer with experienced eyes. I've gotten a lot smarter. And I've realized the government can do what they want, when they want, and as often as they want. All you can do is stand there and scream to high heaven. What scared me was the fact I kept my quiet for 35 years. There was one day that my wife and I, we went to a movie, and they brought this JFK assassination on. And they brought it, and they said it was a coincidence to the fact that there were so many witnesses that died because of unknown reasons, or heart attacks, cerebral vascular accidents. And I just sat there and thought to myself, my God, this could happen to me. Truthfully, the only thing I think that actually saved my tush was they felt that I was too low on the totem pole to worry about. But it literally made me mad. Later on down the line, I thought, well, it's about time the truth should come out. Stop the camera for a minute.
That's what
All right.
Okay, 1, 2, go.
Let's go step by step now through the photographs. What can you tell me about this particular photograph, the so-called stare of death photograph? What can you tell me that strikes you the most about this photo?
Basically, the wound on the neck, which was used as a tracheotomy wound. When we took pictures of the neck, we took two views of the neck, a straight-on view and a side view. Now, on the straight-on view, in this area, you actually saw fragmentation bullet fragments throughout that area, where that area you also saw bone fractures where the bullet had gone through. Same thing on the lateral, but it showed it a different perspective, different depth. Like I had stated before, good way to tell depth of a specific fragment is by taking two planes of interest and then measuring the distance. And at that time, when I first saw the body, the neck was exactly like this. There were no suture marks. It was a big, gaping hole.
And in your opinion, was that man-made?
Yeah, absolutely. You could see where this was man-made, where they had taken a scalpel and went across and down. You can see the down marking caught right here.
So in effect, you think that's a scalpel mark?
Right.
You don't think that's a bullet, part of a bullet entry wound?
No.
Many researchers have said that this, what you see down here, this little part right here, is part of a bullet entry.
You could see the skin, where the skin had separated, and if a bullet fragment came through there, a bullet went through there, it would be serrated, irregular. This was nice and neat, like the skin was separated. Somebody took a ruler and just separated the skin. There was no serrations on it at all. It was perfect. This is one thing for the books. These two films are missing. The AP and lateral cervical spine. They are not in the archives. Basically because that's a part of the evidence. One reason why Pitzer was killed is because he was x-raying, he was x-raying, no. He was taking movies of the body in the gallery. At that time, people had a fit. What is your status? What is your clearance? Why are you here? Stop that now. Evict that man.
Now, for the benefit of people that may not know, who was Willliam Pitzer?
At that time, he was the chief in charge of the photographic department of the National Naval Medical Center. Him and Dennis David were buddies, longtime friends. And Dennis wasn't on duty that night. The Chief Pitzer was. And I remember seeing him that evening. And he was all around. I mean, everywhere you looked, you saw Chief Pitzer. He was there. And it's funny to the fact that the man never noticed what was around him. He kind of turned the commotion off, and he was doing his job. That's what he was paid to do.
What was he doing exactly?
Taking movies.
So he was taking movie film
Right.
of the autopsy of John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
Absolutely.
And you saw this.
I saw that. One thing I have to bring out also. Later on, it was brought out that Commander Pitzer, while of course he made commander, therefore down the line, had committed suicide by blowing his brains out, putting a gun in his right hand and shooting himself. Pardon me?
What's so unusual about that, if you're going to commit suicide?
Well, it's kind of funny. How can you commit suicide when you have a deformed right hand that couldn't hold a gun? This was due to birth defect. And Dennis David knew it. Everybody that knew the chief knew it. And it was evident that night that you could see it when he was taking the movies. You could see the hand was deformed. But that was the reason they had placed on his death certificate, which I felt was part of the cover-up. See, you have to be there. You have to see what's going on. Everything is plain and simple. It's there. It's right in front of you. The government feels the experts, so-called experts, are going to look at everything but the nose on their face. And if you just stopped and looked straight in front of you and not try to surmise, well, this is why this happened, that's why that happened. My God, the skull is pushed backward. Then it must tell you basic physics. You had to have a force from the front. If you had a force from the back, everything would be pushed forward. Common sense. Doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. Stop.
1 second. 1, 2, go.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Tell me what this picture shows. What's its importance?
Well, like I said before, it shows the tracheotomy scar, the opening, which was a bullet hole at that time, a defect you can see around the eye. But I have to bring this up right now. I cannot authenticate these films because I had really nothing to do with them. All I can show you is what I happened to see. The eye was more protruded at that time, but there's nothing to say that the eye wasn't pushed back in because at that time also there was a mortician there doing his work, his job is fixing, making the body more presentable. Let me go to the one of the other films here to show the massive destruction of the skull. This is going to be kind of off-centered here. If you notice, king size opening. What's that? You ever wonder?
I wonder about all of them.
Look at that opening right here.
What does that tell you?
That's a hole. This will be brought out in the next segment. So I can only go so far with that. So this, like I had stated before, there's a lot more information that has to be brought out legally first, and I will delve in it a lot more, which I guarantee I will call you first, and we will do this. But that's a hole, and that can be proven by computer enhancement. Definite. Mm-hmm. You know, there'll be no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They can complain and say, well, you're false, you don't know what you're talking about, but it can be proven by computer enhancement. Mm-hmm. It's a hole. Mm-hmm.
And the next photo?
On the next photo, you see Kennedy on his back, the condition of the scalp, how serrated it is. Serrated in the fact that it's shredded due to fragmentation of the bullet, due to fragmentation of the bone fragments going in and slicing it. At that time, during the autopsy, the complete skull was held together by the skin alone. But you could take the skull, the scalp, and pull it forward or pull it backward, any way, shape, or form you wanted to do, because it wasn't totally attached.
Was his face? His face was mushy and movable at that point?
Mushy and movable.
No, but you couldn't perhaps pull it back enough to cover the defect in the back of the head.
You could drape it across the defect.
You could.
Yes, there was enough of it there, but it was bloody. There was brain cells, brain fragments, all kind of stuff, nasty stuff. And here's one thing that kind of gives a lot of the researchers nightmares. This little flap, a lot of people feel that was man-made. Truthfully, at that time, I did not see that flap.
This flap was not here.
Not there. I cannot justify what was done after I left. Again, the mortician was there. Things were being done. more parts of the skull were being received at night. Bullet fragments were being received that night after I had left.
But what you saw, basically, can you tell me what you saw? Did you see a defect here where there's a scalp?
I saw the defect up in this area, but not this.
Not that particular bone
Not that
flap?
particular fragment. Unless, the only thing I can possibly think of, that the bone fragment was up and in place, and later on the skin was cut and it released the fragment to fall. That's the only, now I'm surmising. This is the only one time throughout the whole thing I surmised that particular reason. Because you got to remember, there were a lot of probing going on at that time.
Probing in what fashion, in what part?
All over, specifically in the skull, and the neck, and the body itself. The pathologists were in there with their hands. Now, if you know Dr. Humes had awful big hands, and he had his hands in the skull.
He actually put his hands in the skull?
Absolutely.
Both of his hands would fit in the skull?
Well, I don't know about both.
But he had at least one.
At least one of them in there.
That was how massive the wound was.
That's right. It behooves me to the fact, I don't know how, he had to be dead when they took him to the Parkland Hospital. There was no way, shape, or form he could have been breathing with that much damage. Just the brain loss enough would be enough to drop any man, to stop him right in his tracks.
Now the brain, since you mentioned the brain, did you happen to see I've heard that there was a brain that night. I've heard there wasn't a brain that night. I've heard the brains were blown out. I've heard that they did have a brain and it was in a bucket. Did you see, you were in the room, did you see any kind of bucket with a brain and formaldehyde that night?
No, I didn't. All I saw within the skull was fragments of the brain. The brain was already out.
How much brain would you say was in the skull, if you had to estimate?
Oh, very little. 5, 10, 15, 16.
Which would be?
Uh,
we talking a handful, half a handful?
Half a handful.
Half a handful.
And only that was just attached to different parts of the mouth and parts of the scalp where it was blown out. So it was a mess, literally. Okay?
All right.
Now you want a break and go into the kitchen, or?